On our own, because we were on the Dan Hunt Butler show, but this is our show on our own, and it's called Voice of Wisdom Radio. It's an inspirational show. We're going to be talking to people who've experienced some obstacles in their lives. We're going to be talking to people who know how to get us on the other side of where the solutions are. We're going to be equipping, we're going to be helping, we're going to be inspiring, but above all, we're going to have a lot of laughs.
Okay. We can do that.
And a lot of real life stories.
Great.
Today's topic is one of my topics that I love very much, because I think that all of us at some point or another have experienced rejection. All of us have experienced disappointment. And I think sometimes we really don't know how to handle disappointment. We don't know how to handle rejection. So we're going to be talking about how to leverage rejection and disappointment for impact and positioning. Can you imagine? You can actually take that rejection, leverage it. You can take disappointment and leverage it for impact and positioning. But before we go into the show, I really want us to tell our story, Brother Doug.
Okay.
Because we have a story.
Yeah, we do.
We've gone through some things.
Yes. Going through a lot of things. Do you want me to start?
Sure, go ahead. Tell us a little bit of your story. And where are you coming from? Who are you? What have you experienced?
Well, let me start off by saying God has blessed me through a lot of things. A lot of things I've gone through. To the point where, I'm retired military, and being in the military, you don't expect things just to go away real quick when you retire, but when you retire, then comes the obstacle of looking for other work, so you retire from one aspect, and then you have to look for another job. And it came to the point where my wife and I, we were really struggling. We were living in went to from an apartment to a home, and then after, moving from an apartment to a home, someone from up north came and offered the guy more than we could offer him, because the home was, I think, about $80-some thousand.
Oh, wow.
Someone from New York offered him $100 and some thousand.
Oh,
so
wow.
we couldn't come up with that. So we really had to move out within 30 days, and
wow.
to be put out of our home, and also then have to move in with family.
Oh, wow.
And when we moved in with family, when you move in with family, it's an obstacle.
It is an
because
obstacle.
everybody who has a home has their own rules and
There
regulations to go by.
There you go.
And so, being a family member, you never expect to pay rent. You have to pay rent. I'm just here for a few days, a month or so, just for 1 month really, and then have to pay rent and things like that. So a lot of things came up, and then a lot of things when we rejected. I thank God for the fact that I've been saved since I was 26.
Awesome.
So a lot of and I'm 64 now.
Oh,
so
wow.
a lot of rejection I learned to handle at a young age.
Wow.
And some people don't know how to handle rejection because, they throw temper tantrums and they just give up on life. But because I, had the ability, and being in the military, you get rejected quite a lot.
I can imagine. Hearing your story, you were saying that you went to the military, you had a whole career, worked, had lived a whole life, and then retired and found yourself in this position where you lost your home, not because of anything, but because somebody offered the guy a little bit more money.
Exactly.
And then you ended up living in another person's house.
Yes.
I can imagine how that feels, especially when you're a married man, and sometimes we women, I think you men have a way of handling things a little better, but we stay home and we get to spend time with the owner of the house, and we want to do something sometimes, and it's really hard. Did you have problems with your wife during that time?
Definitely. My wife wasn't too happy about it, but she understood the fact that we had to move. But what she didn't understand is, how family made us pay rent.
Oh, wow.
For 1 month. And then, of course, we couldn't do this at the house. We couldn't do that at the house. And I hate to say it, but to pay a family member rent, then he has to put you in the attic of his home.
Oh, my gosh.
You couldn't sleep in the bedroom, but you had to sleep in the attic of his home. And there was no beds. Of course, we slept on the mattresses that were provided.
Oh, wow.
And my wife was really, she was like, how could this happen to you? How could he do this to you, your brother's son?
Oh, wow.
So I had to look at it to a point where my wife really, she left the house for a few days. She said, I just can't take this. And to me, I took it personally because as a man to provide, I just felt like a failure at that moment. I mean, a real failure. And so I didn't go back to the street or anything like that or doing things that I used to do. I was forced to pray harder.
See, that's exactly it right there. Because I think that people think that people who are doing really well don't experience rejection.
Yeah.
But I think that if you are ever going to become anything in life, rejection is something you have to get used to.
Yeah.
On every level, literally.
level.
Because when you're starting out in business, you don't have much going for you. You experience rejection and it looks normal.
Right.
But as you begin to grow, you get rejected through the process.
Yeah.
Just as you keep going, you keep getting rejected. And this feeling of feeling like a failure is such a big deal. But Brother Doug, let's talk a little bit about that and kind of go into the psychology of it. Because I think most of it comes from the way we are thinking more than from the reality of our situation.
Yeah. When most of the times when we feel rejected, we take it personally. You know, we think the person rejects, you know, we say they're rejecting me, rejecting how I feel. But no, the rejection is not I had to learn to not take rejection personally. It's just that person said no, and I have to understand that's no. A lot of things I was rejected. Being in the military, I learned from being an Army recruiter that when people reject you, they're rejecting the opportunity.
There you go.
They're not rejecting you. And even in business, I had to learn that people are rejecting the opportunity and not rejecting you.
There you
and
go.
because I understood that, I had to recognize the fact that when it came to Christianity, people reject it. You know, even when you try and provide them the word or give them the word, they reject it. And we take it personally, and we stop talking to people. We stop trying to bring people to Christ because we think they're now our Christianity. We start feeling bad about it.
There you go.
You know, like we've done something wrong, or my testimony is not good enough. But people really reject it because either they're afraid. You know, they're afraid. Most people are afraid of progress, afraid of change.
There you go.
So when it comes to rejection, you have to look at the fact that the rejection is not about you. It's about the change that they are not willing to make.
There you go.
To get a better life. Because some people are really situated in their how do you put it? They are comfortable.
There you go.
In their situation.
You see what
so
I'm
when
saying?
they become comfortable, it's hard to get a person out of their comfort zone. People that are in poverty, if they're comfortable in poverty, they're comfortable in poverty.
You see.
You know, and to offer them something, you know, something better, they look at it as if, you know, why are you asking me to change? I'm comfortable where I am. So I had to realize, even in business, you have to get out of your comfort zone.
There you go.
Because I learned something in this. If you want something different, you got to do something different.
That's right.
That's
right. You see, from 2012 to about 2014, I lost everything. As you remember, in 2012, we were doing all those leadership coaching, wellness coaching seminars, and you would come over and do our recordings for the videos and everything.
Right.
And God was blessing me, setting me up, but my family life just started breaking down. My children started having a lot of challenges. And as the challenges escalated, I found myself torn between trying to build a business and trying to save my kids, especially my son.
Right.
So I started to invest my emotion. And there's something about being a single mother and raising children by yourself.
Yes.
You want them to have a good life. You want them to have a good future.
Right.
When you see that your kids are starting to have problems, in the beginning it really shocks you because you don't know how to handle it. You feel like a failure. You feel like everything you've worked for is being wasted. So in the beginning, I really didn't know how to handle what was happening and what was happening to my son especially. There were nights I spent nights at the door because I was scared he was going to get out of the house and just disappear. So I had very little sleep, stress, a lot of things were happening. And before I knew it, I got really sick and I lost everything. And I found myself out there without a home. My son was in rehab. My daughter was in Pennsylvania and I was alone. There was nobody else to take care of, just me. And I had a very good friend of mine. We had known each other during the time when I had money. and when I could help and when I could make a difference, those heydays.
Yeah.
And this friend of mine invited me to come and live with her at her house. And I told her, I said, things are different. I am sick. I am broken. I'm no longer in the same place that I used to be. But one thing that I really thank God for is that throughout the process of my losing everything, I had a promise in my heart that I held on to.
Yes.
God told me that out of the ashes would arise an army that no man could stop.
Exactly.
And that word alone became my salvation. So as things began to get worse and worse, I had something I could hold on to. But here's a story I want to talk about. When I moved into my friend's house, she's a Christian. She's a woman of God. I'm a woman of God. And this is where rejection becomes real sticky and very interesting. Because if you're a Christian and the other person is a Christian and you both love God, you
Yeah.
expect that because they are children of God, they understand life and they understand the process that God uses. But in reality, not everybody understands the process. And in
Exactly.
reality, God will allow you to go through your process. It's never really about that person it's always about you. So when I got to our house, I found out very quickly within the very first few days that things were not going to work out.
Right.
I realized very quickly that I had stepped into quicksand. And I knew if I don't wake up to the reality that this situation is not going to work, I am going to get hurt. Because the person I thought she wasn't really the person she was at home.
Exactly.
But in reality, she had expectations. She had expectations. She wasn't expecting a sick, weak, broken person to walk through the house. Even though I told her I was sick, she still somehow believed I was strong enough to get to her city, get a job, and start working. She also thought I had savings that I had set aside, so I would get there and I'd be able to help out in the house. But the reality was completely different. I didn't have any money. I was driving a very nice, very expensive car, but I had no money. I had a lot of faith, and I was sick and I was broken. And I was going to my friend who is a prayer warrior that I thought she would carry me through with prayer. But when I got there, what I found was totally different. The abuse and the problem started right away. The one thing I did very quickly is shelter my heart. I refused to get involved. I refused to allow her words to reach me because some of the things she would say to me were, I know what you did. You sinned against God. That's why you're going through this. So let's talk about that just a little bit. There are a lot of children of God who go through this process of death. And in my book that I'm writing, Contending for Harvest, I deal with the subject of death, the process of death that God uses to bring us into prosperity. But then it looks like Christianity, there are parts of Christianity that can be confusing sometimes. This idea that when you're going through, it's because you've sinned against God. Tell me, did you ever experience that during that time of your trouble? Did anybody ever tell you were going through because you had sinned against God? Did people say things to you that made you feel uncomfortable?
Well, I must say this. I had a tough, tough road to hoe, which means I had to really buckle up as a man. See, and I know this for a fact, and men experience things totally differently. I've had people, tell me, they didn't tell me I've done anything wrong, but people looked at me and I could tell that they're saying, well, he looks good. But is he doing good?
There you go.
Because people want to see something. So people were looking at me as if, and honestly, at that time, I was, how those saying goes, robbing Peter to pay Paul.
There you go.
And honestly, now I've gotten to the point where in my life down the road where I don't even know who Peter and
You've forgotten their names.
I've forgotten their names because I don't have to rob them anymore.
Not anymore.
But people who, people did not, they did not at a point, say you've sinned against God. But in a sense, when you are a pastor, people look at pastors and put them on a pedestal and expect them to be, to do all where they can do everything. And honestly, my only concern at that time was my family.
There you go.
I didn't care about the outside friends or the neighbors. I cared about what my children saw.
There you go.
What my wife saw when they looked at me. And that was sometimes the only struggle I had. was whether they saw me as the man that they knew me as, or that they see someone broken. And along the way, I had to realize I will not allow my children or my wife to see me broken.
There you go.
I wouldn't do that, because they need to find the leadership. They need to be able to look up themselves to someone. And if I'm broken, I learned one thing a long time ago. The man is the head of the house.
There you go.
Now, when it comes to me being the head, doesn't mean I don't boss my wife around, anything like that. Is that every child, and women, let me preface that by saying this: women need to know they're secure with the man that they're with.
There you go.
If they don't have the security, they don't feel secure, that can go a long way in the relationship and making people not feel good about themselves. And my wife, because sometimes she would say things, and she said this, and this has happened because you're doing this, and you need to pray more. And I'm like, well, I'm praying all I can.
So then for me, the pressure was coming from outside, because I didn't have anybody in my life that was a significant other that would critic me and say, hey, you did this and you did that. But I had a friend, and in an upside down way, it's very interesting, because when you come from a place where you were honored and you were respected, you had your own life, you were the center of everything. Everybody looked up to you. I was the woman that people came to for solutions and for answers.
Exactly.
I was the one that literally took up people's bills and paid their bills. I was the one that was the honorable person. If I walked through the room, people knew the solutions have come. Now the tables are turned, and I'm sitting on the other side, and I have nothing. But never did I ever feel like I was useless. Throughout that process, I never felt like I wasn't good enough. I knew I was sick, but I knew God was going to heal me. I knew my son was in trouble, but I knew God had solutions. I knew we had lost our home, and I had lost the means of survival, but I knew that I was rich on the inside because I had training. I'm a professional coach. I had a lot on the inside of me. That's when the reality of my message that I preached to my church, from the very beginning, I told my people, never take anything personal. Life is not personal. People behave the way they are. It's never about you. It's about them. And most of the time, they have issues of their own, and those issues have just found an opportunity because of the circumstances that are in front of them. So never take anything personal. So in reality, as she would do these crazy things, and another thing that happened is like they stripped me of my honor. Like I'm no longer a woman of God. Like I'm no longer a pastor. Would go places would go somewhere where she would be preaching, and I'd go with her, and I'd sit, and I'd never be introduced as pastor, and I'd never even meet the people. Like I'd be put in the back. I'd be put in the back like, hey, you have no honor here. But again, I never allowed that to bother me, because I knew that my ministry was not predicated on approval or recognition, because God had already worked through some things before this time came. I had already gone through the process of, there was a time when I wanted validation. There was a time when I wanted somebody to see me and say, hey, we see you, and we see you're doing a good job. But I'd already come past all that. Where I was in my life, I was at a place where I was comfortable with who I was. I was comfortable in my calling. I was comfortable in my gifting, but I was also comfortable with the process. Because I knew I was transitioning to the other side, where I'm going to meet the army that no man can stop. I knew that at the end of this, I will have a ministry that cannot be stopped. So everything that was coming at me, I never personalized it. But I'm the privileged few. I am the privileged few. Because lots of saints of God, including men of God, they go through this process of stripping that God uses to bring you the process of preparation, the process that strips you of yourself so you can find the real you that God created. You can find the boldness and the power that's in you. And sometimes when they go through that process, they get hurt and they get broken, and some of them end up leaving the ministry altogether. They end up stopping to trust people because they feel like people are not trustworthy. Christians are liars. But you and I are sitting here as testimonies, because I have come through that season, and me and my friend have since reconciled. She apologized. But the reality is that there are people who are going through this that we are talking about. But before we go any further, I really would love for us to stop and take a break so that we can listen to a song that will validate what we're talking about and get people the opportunity to get themselves together and call in. If you're out there and you're listening to us, you can call in, and the number is 478-569-6474. Also, we're streaming live on Periscope. So you can join us live on Periscope. You have a contribution? Have you gone through what we're talking about? Please call in. We'd like to hear your voice.
Yes.